Hi everyone, Allie at My Safe Place here. It's been a really long time since I did my last video, 5 months ago approximately, possibly 6. I have to look back, and there's been a lot going on. Basically, we've moved clear across the country from the West Coast all the way out to the Canadian Maritimes, and very happy to be here. It's been quite the journey, and that's kind of what today's video is all about. So thank you for joining me. Talking a little bit about finally getting to get away and explore a little bit of a blank slate. And for those of us who've had to endure years, perhaps even childhoods that began with narcissistic abuse and being smeared, a blank slate can be a really, really big deal. And that's kind of what we're getting here, my husband and I, and my daughter, who came with us. My son stayed behind for work on the West Coast, and his hope is to eventually move to central Canada. Toronto would be a really great location for him, and possibly for my daughter too. And the reason we ended up here is because this is originally where my husband is from. So he has a lot of family here. He has a lot of friends that are still here or who come back here for summers and vacations and to visit with their own family and friends. So it's not a pure blank slate in the sense of absolutely nobody knowing who we are or what we're about. But it certainly is a fairly good foundation for a blank slate for me because my current husband is a wonderful person. I'm very lucky. And he's very well regarded, as is his family. And because we've been visiting for vacations and for family ourselves over the past 15 years that we've been together, I've gotten to know a lot of his family and friends and established a whole new set of relationships that are based solely on who we are as people in the moment and have not been tainted whatsoever by my family of origin and by my ex-husband, with both of which have a lot of cluster B personality disorders going on, with the incumbent smearing and controlling and gaslighting and everything else that goes with it. So it's been quite the journey. We've been very, very fortunate in that my husband is able to work remotely in what he does. So he didn't have to quit his job. And we moved in with my in-laws, who have this huge house that's been in the family for several generations, lots of room. And then when the opportunity arose, which happened very quickly, we were able to purchase our own house quite close to where they are, and where nieces and nephews and cousins for the kids are. And here it is. This is my brand new kitchen. This is our brand new safe place. And it's been amazing, I have to say. It's interesting because it hasn't been all completely smooth sailing, and we've certainly taken a fair number of precautions with regard to both my daughter's father and my own family. One of the fortunate things about living where we're living currently is that mail is delivered to post office boxes, so not to individual homes, which is great. And we did take the precaution of getting a completely separate post office box for my daughter, so that it would be much easier for her to receive correspondence directly from her father and his side of the family, without it encroaching upon our male. And a big part of that is because both she and I have been diagnosed with and are suffering from complex PTSD. So we have a big tendency to be hypervigilant. And I did a lot of healing work before we left using the most recent healing methodology that I found incredibly helpful was shamanic style healing. And my daughter's still beginning her healing journey. So for her, the hypervigilance is a lot more prevalent. It's a lot more present in her daily life. And so we're working through that. And she's been able to slowly come to terms with the fact of who her father is and become aware of more of his behavior patterns and understand how that has absolutely nothing to do with who she is and what's going on with her. And so my hope is that she's going to find a healing modality that helps her on her journey, and that I don't believe that this would have been possible for either of us and for my husband if we hadn't actually physically and geographically made this move, made it much harder for people who are accustomed to controlling us to get to us. Now, that's not possible for everyone. And I had to wait until both my children, or I felt it necessary to wait until both my children were in their early 20s, which they are. And my son is graduated from college and has an excellent job in his field of study. So, and he felt perfectly fine with us going away and coming to visit when for family holidays, etc. And my daughter was at a stage in her school and career where she was taking a break from all of it, and coming to the Maritimes was actually going to make it a lot easier and closer for her to pursue what she wanted to do. So the timing, everything had to line up perfectly, and it kind of did. And even with regard to selling the townhouse we were living in at the time, in our particular complex, there happened to be a huge run on the units just at that moment when we were actually ready to sell. So we were able to turn it over and make enough money for it to be very comfortable for us to move back here. So all in all, I have to say that the whole process fell into line quite nicely. Not to say that things ran perfectly, because they sure didn't. It's moving, and we were moving across the country. While we did let go of most of our furniture and heavier items like books, etc., we still had a problem with the moving company that eventually got resolved, but that took 3.5 months of pretty much constant pressure on my part for them to step up and do the right thing. This was a big company, and I'm not going to name names because, like I said, in the end, they did resolve it to our satisfaction. It just took a lot of work. And there were other issues. My daughter started to have physical health issues, which is understandable if you know anything about complex PTSD and or being an empath and or narcissistic abuse. It can start to have an impact on you physically. So some of that stuff really started to come out big time for her once she was actually geographically and physically away from the source of all of the stress, which I think happens to a lot of people. It's like we can hold it together and hold it together and hold it together until we're finally free and we've finally been released from all of the stress and pressure, and that's when we have our breakdowns, physically, mentally, emotionally, what have you. So here we are in this new place with our semi-blank slate and an opportunity, a unique opportunity to rebuild almost from the ground up and rediscover who I am as a person, as a wife, as a mother. I used to be an artist. I used to be a dancer, a choreographer, an actor. I used to enjoy singing. Singing is probably off the table. Radiation pretty much did a big number on my vocal cords. You can see my nice little scarring over there a little bit. This camera isn't the greatest, but it'll do. And the other day I came upon one of my favorite Buddhist proverbs, which is, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. And boy, did that ever start to happen just recently. We sort of settled with some of the renovations in this new home that we just moved into. We had to renovate the kitchen quite a bit. We had to renovate the bathroom, the powder room, and other things. And as things started to settle down, all of a sudden I started to have the space and the time to be able to explore some stuff again that I had left by the wayside through all of this gigantic work that is required in moving, especially such a huge move as we made clear across this vast country of ours. So as I started to do that, I started to tune in again to some of my favorite YouTubers and podcasts, most notably too, within days of seeing this Buddhist proverb about when the student is ready, the teacher will appear, both of whom started to talk about energy vampires and narcissistic abuse, and how really the work that we need to do on ourselves centers around healing the inner child. So that's probably what I'm going to be exploring over the coming weeks and months. And both Kris Godinez, who is on YouTube, she's fantastic. I've been following her for a while. Love what she has to say. She has some question and answers on YouTube. Sometimes they run up to 2 hours long, but there are just these amazing moments, these gems. And this one I was watching, and I'll put a link below so you can all see it. I think it happens within the first 12 to 15 minutes of this particular video, which is a good 2 hours long, where she starts talking about healing the inner child and how it's absolutely essential that after we've broken off or gone no contact or gray rocked or low contacted the narcissist that we're trying to get away from, that it's really, really important that we take a year at least to do this work, so that we're not vaulting back in to that automatic inner child that tends to want to control things when things get stressful for us, and starts making decisions for us about who should be our life partner, etc., or who we want to connect with as a friend or create relationship with. And then unless and until we do that healing work, that wounded inner child is always going to come up and always going to make those decisions that take us back into exactly the same pattern, because it's familiar, it's what we know. And I'm sure that many of you out there can relate to exactly that. And following that, I got an email from Hay House, a podcast from Dr. Christiane Northrup, whose books I've read over the years and absolutely adored when she was a guest on, shows like Oprah or what have you. Always tuned in, had a really close listen to what she had to say. She also approaches things from the energy vampire empath standpoint, which I resonate with as well. And right near the end of this particular podcast, which I will link below in the information box, she talks about healing that inner child. And I love to hear it. I love it when there's this synchronicity of messages that we can get and that we can choose to pay attention to or ignore, depending on where we're at. And I really believe that if I'm getting this message, it's probably time to do this work. And what's interesting is that now with this sort of relaxation, and I'm never going to stop being completely vigilant, because I don't believe that my ex-husband especially would necessarily ever let me go. completely, 100%. Even though our children are grown and doing very well, I think that he would still look for a way to get in. So there is always going to be part of me that's watching and careful. But I think has been a relaxation that he's not going to be around the next corner, that he's not going to be able to find me and have me served like he has in the past with quite as much ease as he has before. And we've had to have discussions with my son, who isn't as aware of who he is as our daughter is, about not revealing our civic address or, exactly where we're located, and holding on to our privacy. So we have that safety net, and with that added safety net, I think that this new blank slate that we created for ourselves, and I think anyone can create a blank slate in however way is going to work for you, that I'm going to be able to go deeper and do that required healing work. And it's only because I got incredibly lucky with my second husband, because it was so inner child that was coming up to the surface when he and I first started dating. Inner child was there big time. And it's only, I think, because he was so grounded and healthy and really took his time. There was none of this rush. Let's hurry up and get engaged and live together and married. We were geographically separated by about a 2-hour drive at the time. So we had a geographical separation. We had his innate cautiousness, because he's an engineer. He's analytical. Everything has to be slow and processed and analyzed from every particular angle. So in that sense, when I first met him, I got incredibly lucky that my inner child did not get to have her way, and that I recognized how amazing he was as a person, and that he was worth waiting for, as opposed to every other relationship I'd ever engaged with, where my inner child and that person's narcissist met, and the speed and all of those other red flags that people tell you to look out for worked. In this case, they weren't there, it didn't happen, and I got, in spite of not having done the inner child work, my inner child got put in her place. So very happy to say that I'm hoping, fingers crossed, that things can continue to move forward, that the inner child work is going to happen, and that I can share that journey with you in the hopes of showing that it can be done, and encouraging others to discover their own blank slate and decide exactly what and how you want to create on it. And I'm not going to say write, because that's not for everybody. Maybe you want to paint, maybe you want to sing, maybe you want to origami your blank slate. Who knows? It's up to you. And that's the beauty of this particular state, is it's totally up to you. So enjoy. Get there. It's worth it. It's worth it, even if you have a difficult moment, company. Okay, so hope to speak with you much sooner than another 5 months, and fill you in a little bit on what's been going on as I do this inner child healing work. Thanks. Have a great day.